In this video, we're going to discuss access and equity considerations. So really important for you as trainers and assessors, you understand this, but it's important for the whole organisation, and in fact, it's important for most organisations. It is becoming increasingly important. So access and equity considerations are summarised briefly at the start of the assessor guide, but to get a better understanding, we'll look at a definition and the policy and procedures manual. So we'll look at the definition of access and equity provided on the ASQA website. Policies and approaches aimed at ensuring that VET is responsive to the individual's needs of clients whose age, gender, cultural or ethnic background, disability, sexuality, language skills, literacy or numeracy level, unemployment, imprisonment or remote location may present a barrier to access, participation and the achievements of suitable outcomes. So let's look at the policies and procedures VFA has in place to ensure that we're compliant with our access and equity requirements. So you can find this policy and procedure under Sowing the Seed. If you've got any issues in finding it, make sure you speak to compliance. So if we have a look at this, again, we've got a policy and procedures here. So again, our commitment, we're looking at VFA Learning is committed to promoting and implementing the principles of, and it lists some major acts here. And you need to ensure that you've got an understanding of those major acts. So as discussed earlier, a lot of these points relate to the enrolment and recruitment process. So we're going to discuss them less during this presentation, but it's important that you understand that VFA doesn't discriminate in relation to enrolment and recruitment. But we do have an obligation to be upfront with students about their ability to complete the course and enter an industry. So an example may be if a student had a disability where they had no use of their arms. Obviously, a big component of the personal training course is that you need to be able to do first aid and CPR. So that person, based on their disability, wouldn't be able to successfully complete that part of the course. Some of the key points related to training and assessment. So we have a fairly thorough career consultation process where we collect information on the student and any special requirements. And then we have a handover with their homeroom teacher. So this is really important so that we know what the student's needs are, and then we pass that information across to the homeroom teacher. If you're new to the organisation or haven't been a homeroom teacher before, it's still important that you get an understanding of this handover process. It's very important that we communicate between the staff that sign students up and the homeroom trainers and teachers as to what the needs of the clients are. So Stu, how do the career consultants collect information on special needs of students?
It's usually done through the pre-training review and application process.
So is there a special form that's completed?
There is. Once all the evidence has been collected, they'll do a homeroom handover checklist, which is pasted on the inside generally of the student file.
And then what happens after that?
So then, prior to the course commencing, the career consultant, AC, compliance officer and homeroom teacher will have a meeting to discuss every single student in that class and bring up any potential issues or bits of information that the homeroom teacher needs to be aware of before they take on those students.
So what's some examples of things that have come up?
It could be students away on a holiday for a couple of weeks during the part of the course, or there might be some medical conditions that people need to know about, or some even learning difficulties that a student may have. So all those type of things are collected throughout.
So VFA offers RPL and credit transfer for students who have had diverse work and study experiences previously. VFA Learning has to provide cultural safety for students from a diverse background from a cultural and language point of view. So if VFA Learning has Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander students, we'll consult with the local people for guidance in supporting that student. Also, if we have students that have got language literacy or numeracy issues, we need to put support services in place to make sure those students aren't disadvantaged. VFA Learning doesn't have as many students in this cohort as many other training organisations, but we still have procedures in place if the situation arises. We've designed our curriculum to be flexible and inclusive, and it avoids non-inclusive and discriminatory language. We make sure our assessment process is fair, valid, reliable and consistent, and we assess that through the validation process to make sure all those processes and principles are being applied. VFA needs to ensure that they provide students with adequate information in relation to the course, so that basically the students know what they're up for, so they know what the commitment is going to be for training and assessment in relation to days a week, how much homework they're going to get, whether they're going to need to use the computers or the learning management system, how many assessments there are going to be, what sort of assessments that there are, and what support they're going to get in relation to all this. So it's really important that we're up front. This is what it's all going to be about, and this is what the commitment's going to be. So students have the right to appeal an assessment or recognition decision, which we'll discuss in a later video, but it's really important as part of our fairness process that students do get to have the right to appeal a decision. So VFA Learning has reasonable adjustment in place. This relates to being able to adjust assessments to accommodate for students' needs. Again, we'll discuss this in more depth when we look at reasonable adjustment, which is a separate section of the assessor guide. VFA has a clear grievance and appeals process in place, so make sure you're familiar with this. We discuss it later, but it's really important that that's very clear so the student can look at the procedure and clearly work out I've got a problem, I've got a grievance or an appeal. This is the steps I take to make sure that my grievance or appeal is attended to by VFA Learning. Adaptive technology is investigated, developed and made available where possible. So an example is now you can get software that assists people with sight impediments or partial blindness to better see the screen. It actually makes the font size larger as they're looking through it. So this would be an example of an adaptive technology we could use to assist a student. At the back of the policy and procedure related to access and equity, you'll see some other relevant legislation. So I guess it's just you've got a responsibility, VFA, but you as an individual, to understand this legislation and your responsibilities in regards to access and equity. Ensure if there's anything that you don't quite understand, you speak to either your academic coordinator and your manager, and they'll follow it up.